Aqui é RM Office 5521, Rio de Janeiro, Brasil. Rio de Janeiro City, Federative Unit, Rio de Janeiro National State, Brazil. We will kind of make our movement today, considering the SWOT analysis and observing the market America, which is still open, so we can operate or cooperate. We will observe that on present time we had this speech and the physification of concepts between bullish and dovish and bearish, and for sure, in my opinion, this is something very specific that you can keep this because it's an issue, but we will work with things that we had because it's more simple, it's objective, and we kind of considering Brazil or some areas as itself, because we can have the anti-crime speech or argument with areas that didn't consider the research, never. So we will move like this. We will check that in a very specific moment we consider that could have a physification of environment, and this physification will be a very promiscuous area, and this is a procedure that comes from the approach between two different sides have the increasement of association. This format, the idea is Ponzi scam. In global scam, this is a pandemic event with specific heads on it. Those heads will have the interest and do not have the proper financial control, which will block the flow as dubious or duplicity or things that you must avoid. But they will avoid the financial control and set the instruments to do not have the courage as doing this inside your company or public department or macro organization, and you have the flow kind of freely, and the economic control of the type of flow will not exist, and the evaluation will be based on registry and budgets that indeed are not fully filled by the integrity as instrument, because they are not operating as control. And the physification of this area indeed will be a reality, and it's a reality on present time because it's confirmed that you decrease the economic control as the evaluation of type of flow, and the financial control, which will have the identity as the flow by your company or environment. And this is the we can observe by the physification as debit and credit, considering a single argument inside, for instance, a e-commerce website that can have or set the confusion between an operation as simple operation as seller. It can be the seller and the buyer at the same time by a duplicity of accounts or logins logged in a very first moment at him. But considering the duplicity of hedges to observe even on electoral procedure, a single person can have multiple documents and identification, and of course that this in global scale sets to the econometric control as minimum is ordinary squares, and this residual activity as control, compiled and storage in global scale will be in a very specific moment a situation as reality, which can be, for instance, a bank. And the bank has the first function as the interface between people that need money and the money, the storage at the bank that belongs to someone else, and the bank will operate this to take advantage and get the result. But if the storage money belongs to criminal and the bank is operating using a criminal result, the bank indeed is a notation inside the criminal organization. And we can have this by database sigma comparative model, considering the integration of microenvironment and macroenvironment give me the conjunctural distortion as sigma with the density as argument from the macroeconomy until each one of econometric notation inside the identity. You can do this. or inside your debt and credit, inside your corporate economic and finances, or inside your microeconomy supply and demand. And will give me the observation that indeed I'm not respecting the limit as possibility, go doing things beyond the frontier of possibility, and this will of course affect the balance in a negotiation or in a relationship, because one side will kind of obtain or take advantage of a lot of instruments considering that fused area, as observed in the previous board, which was the area full of qualities, and I would say or arguments. The database sigma from approach as microeconomy and macroeconomy allowed me to do this by the frequency of operations that I have, not trending to the balance of things, which can be something low, as you can have a loss to obtain an advantage, or you can impose a loss on someone or take an advantage, or take an advantage by no reasons. For instance, at using the pandemic event to transfer money as a big transference like Rio de Janeiro, 1 billion, small units as tax stimulus around the globe. You are indeed in both cases transferring economic empowerment by an argument that you are unable in present time to have the transparency and accountability to economic agents, very specific. This behavior can have a factorial behavior, and this factorial behavior indeed will be the composition of risk on present time, considering the mandatory need against this research. But this research as the house bound, which is the paper that will pay 33 trillion as the entire money diverted from public area Brazil. If you have the same failure in 2022, when this goal seems 1988 on the annual budget, I think that you have a systematic behavior, has interest, combined by peers and integrated by the solidarity as pay this bill. If you violate my basic rights and guarantees, considering essential needs at communication and consume, but the argument in a diffuse area affecting other interests, maybe on America, of course that you will have this argument. And this can, if you are in present time embarrassed by this paper and you are considered not have the payment of this paper, because you will be traced as a criminal and you will suffer consequences. The causality, my friend, has no relation with the paper as itself as payment. It was told to you this, because if you do not have the mind to pay this, the causality will remain, you will be sent to jail. It's a different thing, By the purpose as factoring, considering the anticipation of payments in a single unique payment, considering the type of people, the quality of people that you have observed. The criminal research is nowadays the utilitarian level as instrumental activity of this housebound that allowed me to get the bank with an account, the budget with a decision, the contracts with signatures, the bank receiving with an account, holding an account, which is associated with a budget failure or with transference by a decision. I can have the individualization by the decision after check the failure on the budget, and the storage in an account in a bank, and this bank is operating this money. We have a criminal scam. If this go by a factorial notation, indeed we are setting a Ponzi scheme in global scale. And the contracts and signatures, after, for instance, you have this money transferred from the bank or from the storage or from the investor operator that received money, for instance, diverted from public to budget Brazil to be applied on America after the America passed through a difficult time. Of course, that we are talking about maybe laundering scam in the same way. And you can have, for instance, big money laundered by the IPO, and for sure some companies are suffering sadly by this. Then we will move to our conversation on present time, and then in today, which is something like this. We will check that we could observe that the Russia was considering have the action beyond the limits of their possibility, and we set an argument that maybe could have the interest as be surrounded by elements, and those elements, which is the crown and the area as a glowstone, will have an association, I would say, or something like this by the purpose and keep the stability. And then we are doing this as a simulation, and the stability will be oriented to, of course, offer military defense for the area that has no military defense enough, and receiving options at the market, kind of open the market, maybe have a stock option at this closed environment like Russia. And you will receive all things all around, but considering that sometimes you have the risk insertion inside the supply chain, the logistics system, and maybe you can have poisoned food or something like this. Special concern for the Drug Administration in America, and one of the main core targets at the Federal Bureau of Investigation for weapons of mass destruction. And you, by the huge military capacity that you have, will offer this information by the crown surround you, which is the NATO. Then we will check on present time that this behavior observed at this diary goes at the macro economy as global event. I mean macro conjuncture. We will observe that maybe we will have this similarity by the micro economy. Considering that was suggested that to the white collar crime offer you as criminal to prevent consequences and obtain advantage. For instance, a global company has a lot of tax problems, and then this global company is offering a huge scam in global scale, and will, of course, claim and deserve maybe the forgive of the tax scams inside, despite the information of tax criminals must be offered to the Federal Bureau of Investigation in America or to the OECD to prevent that new scams comes and turn this situation into a model, which is not the point, but the situation exists, and we can suffer more loss and have the continuity of the survive at the industrial man strategy by things that sometimes are beyond our control. And this is the SWOT analysis. The external environment indeed has we had the capacity to solve problems sometimes at this area. We observe that, for instance, I have the disruptive event in America, the tax stimulus, and a lot of small business, because indeed we will check that this model, as we could have here, has a limit, is limited on present time. We consider use the quadrant tracer and the new tracer. The new tracer will give me the perception as operation as flow and reversal flow. If I have a contract to deliver something and I know this contract and do the operation again, I have no noise. Or if I can't have this operation no to do this one more time, I will only check the values, and of course that I will have no noise, especially as debit and credit, considering the payments as transfers by this contract, which sets the premise to use the bank interface. And this puts ourselves in a bigger moment or in another level, which is the supply and demand, considering a simple operation as offer and sell something and do the purchase of something. When you have this as a contract, indeed you are having the ambition or the intention to use the bank interface. And in global, in a macro perception, we will have this as our investment saving curve and the liquidity money curve, and the failures will be presented as gaps at the curve, which will be presented in the same way in each group at the economic net as supply and demand, and in each operation as debt and credit. And of course that when you do this by the new trades, it was suggested to use a lot of instruments available, especially on big techs by the e-commerce, and you can go anywhere at this pandemic year. And we will check that this situation will, for instance, have the quadrant trace observing public departments associated with distortion in a local area by the international global premise, the localization of transnational organized crime going by public departments, and the menace to all of us, for sure, it's a new mafia. A new mafia set by public department will commit crime and have the register of crime committed, can threat a regular citizen, can threat a regular business, can threat a regular criminal activity. And of course that we are talking about an activity 00, internal value 00, all criminal. Then we observe that these groups on present time are distributed like this, and they will have kind of a very specific notation here, which is holding the money, and they are this big circle is transferring the money for them as the relation at the very first moment as scratch, and if they do things or not, they will have the coverage of the spread. And these small units indeed are operating with other levels. And this going on and on by the counting of principle, indeed will put ourselves in this area here, which is the most promiscuous behavior as projection from the authorization to use the instruments of control, instruments of payment as debit and credit, but with the physification of both put ourselves into the cryptocurrency maybe. But how can we confirm this? Because the quadrant tracer, we observe that we have the public departments on it, that goes inside specific seats that are a piece of a specific federative unit go inside one specific nation, and it's limited, because we must track now the hood having new business, and this new business operating by this kind of model, especially using the cryptocurrency, will give me the perception of someone that indeed is holding or operating as a storager, I'd say, at the market, at the financial market. And this has an operation named HEDGE. This HEDGE is a fund of money, but if this fund of money had our origin of something illegal, indeed this is a laundering scam, can you get? And you will have the choke of those, some of those arguments here as a small business recently created to be integrated as entire capital asset by Pricey scam, and you have this kind of method by the supply chain with a unique owner with a lot of images inside the supply chain. And the integration of this model around give us the idea that the concept as bullish, dovish, or bearish indeed are not relevant. I mean, it much more relevant have the quadrant tracer by new business, considering the profile of this new business to understand how this new business got created from the origin of this money, to check if we have any kind of legal storage that will be linked maybe with a situation that will put as a question mark here as the benefit obtain advantages and maybe stimulus, and of course that we have budgets at this area here with the question mark, signature, and a lot of things pointing maybe to the same group of offender. We'll finish here. Have a nice weekend. The paper, indeed, if you do not pay, you'll be sent to jail anyway, And it suggested to have the Mr. Mike Pompeo as the charger of this paper, America, operated in America by the American law, and have 50% half, of this paper to pay this financial service. And we are having this cooperation to understand how the new business can track your environment, especially by the multiplicity of hedges has possibility linked with a single and individualized element that can, guess what, have a multiplicity of options at the electoral system, and things goes like this. But the quadrant tracer will lead ourselves to the public department zone failure integrated by corruption at the transnational organized scam, considering gains at the financial system operating like this. And we have maybe a hedge, but a hedge not as a pure hedge, a hedge oriented to support the laundering scam in global scale that must be crossed with other instruments. And the financial service is nominated to do this. In America, American market still open, not closed yet. We operated as the key bulls. Have a nice day.